So, in getting into the spirit of today's title, I've been conducting some personal research into the mysteries of ancient Mesoamerican mythologies, and Mamma Mia, what I've uncovered has been eye-opening. They believed in three primordial deities whose names, when uttered in the form of a repetitive chant, could evoke their cataclysmic powers to raise this world in a holy flame and recreate it in the vision of he or she who called upon them. So potent were these entities that their names had been spoken only in whispers among the highest-ranking priests and lost to the sands of time. Or so it was thought. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, with the help of a dusty tome, I've managed to trace the origins of the names through cryptic puzzles and found them hidden among complex, nuanced codes thought too complicated for such primitive societies. And seeing as I've grown tired of residing on this tragic mortal coil, I've decided to shed my earthly body and ascend to my rightful throne of godhood. If you prostrate yourselves now, you might survive the cleansing. I call upon thee, O Wa, she who grants the breath of life, Tashi, he who keeps the cosmos in perfect balance, Tai-Am, harbinger of great upheavals, witness me, O Wa, Tashi, Tai-Am, O Wa, Tashi, Tai-Am, O what a shit I am, motherfucker. I thought $20 for unlimited power sounded too good to be true. In today's humble opinion, we're awkwardly changing the subject in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Definitive Edition. Speaking of things that are too good to be true, when I said Shadow of the Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, I was reading all of the promotional material related to the humble choice rather than the less obvious text that dictates it will only have the base game. Boy, that sure is confusing. It's almost as if it isn't the Definitive Edition at all and probably shouldn't be referred to as such. I guess I should read what I pay for more closely, given that Humble continues to call their trustworthiness into question a little more with every passing day. To be fair, the point's been made that it's on Square Enix for making the Definitive Edition all there is on Steam and continuing to peddle base game keys to vendors under that title, and Humble has since changed the promotional material to more accurately reflect what customers are buying. Insidious ploy to boost sales of a newly launched program or an untimely goof? I'll leave that for you to decide. In the meantime, let's switch our focus to Lara Croft. You guys might be able to recognize her by her shadow, the Shadow of the Tomb Raider. That's because, surprise, she is the Tomb Raider, and therefore when she stands in the path of light rays, she leaves that instantly recognizable silhouette across anything said light would have otherwise collided with. She's the hero, oh shit, she's the tragic onlooker of this story and has been watching people die horrifically just as we have watched her die horrifically across a trilogy of reimagined titles. The first was a resounding success given that it was a bold reimagining of an already established series that, while beloved by many, was restricted by the resources at the time it was created. It had fantastic narrative pacing, demanded emotional investment, and had a gritty atmosphere that was as visceral as it was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece that set a high bar of expectation. Tragically, it didn't quite capture the Tomb Raider vibes that longtime fans were hoping for. That's always a tricky situation to be in, balancing the desires of a general audience with newcomers to the series and its hardcore fans. But at the end point of the development cycle, as soon as the game hit the shelf, a powerful identity had been established. It's been tarnished by wishy-washy indecisiveness ever since. You see, I remember Yamatai. I remember the plot, the characters, the set pieces, and the thrilling surprises that waited around every corner. I can't say the same for the second game. I just remember that there was a lot of snow and a grizzly bear. I'm pretty sure that all I'm going to remember from this game is being underwater and hating every second of it. In their self-imposed struggle to appease masses of differing tastes, the developers have muddled the game's identity. It doesn't quite resonate with fans of the older series, it doesn't hit the mark set by Tomb Raider 2013, and its efforts to reach a more general audience are more half-hearted than a quadriplegic's effort to get an erection. The biggest point that they try to sell you on is that they have de-emphasized combat and made the game more about exploration and puzzle solving, just like the original Tomb Raiders. The good thing is that it led to tombs that were incredibly well designed, interesting to work your way through, and some of them even managed to be plot points for once. They also made use of ancient relics that gave riddles that would have you examine the environment in order to find treasure, and though I greatly enjoyed that, I felt it was woefully underused, especially since all of the actual rewards for exploring, collecting, gathering, and solving puzzles are combat related. Resources were mostly used for weapon upgrades or crafted items like healing salves or arrows. Gold was explicitly used for shops which sold weapons or armor that either helped in combat or gathering resources for combat. That's a weird balance. A better one would have been to limit gun selection altogether to style preference. Bow, pistol, rifle, shotgun, all of those are fine, but there is no real need for variation beyond that since you don't use them enough. Beef up the puzzles and then put the modeled treasure with lore attached to them where the solutions are. Those would be pretty rewarding, especially when blended with the satisfaction of solving the puzzle to begin with. Perhaps the worst thing to come out of that though are the shitty filler portions that take place where interesting combat segments might have better filled in. Like the 20 yards of rock climbing more sluggish than a gastropod without a shell. Don't worry though, they threw in the occasional gap so you could inevitably die due to the sometimes unreliable jumping mechanics and restart that segment all over again. Because that's how you keep players entertained. You make them do menial tasks over and over and over again, and you highlight how your game has failed. When you're taking a breather from scaling walls, you get to play the breathing micromanagement game that is the plethora of underwater portions. Not only do they all look unremarkably the same, they're more or less combat segments with all of the fun parts butchered out. You have to sneak past enemies that will attempt to kill you on sight, but you can't kill the enemies and you're stuck to the limitations of underwater controls. Oh, and you can't fucking breathe, so remember to do that every now and then. They succeeded in delivering in some areas, but it was at the cost of a significant portion of their game. Next, we get into the attempts to deliver to the new crowd of Tomb Raider fans from 2013 onwards. They wanted to maintain that action-packed, stressful, visceral atmosphere that puts old Lara through hell. But there were a few problems. The first is that we're now focused on exploration and puzzle solving, which isn't conducive to a story in which you have a very finite amount of time to prevent the end of the world brought about by various horrible natural disasters. The second is that the slowed pacing and reduction of enemy forces to take out limit the opportunities to create intense set pieces full of chaos and drama. Granted, they manage with scenarios like the Jaguar and the flood sequence, but those are the two moments I can remember out of the whole thing, and everything that happens afterwards is, oop, that old rotting wooden plank broke. Oop, the walls are closing in around Lara so tight that one poorly timed Big Mac in her digestive tract would have trapped her in an early grave. Oop, the same thing, but this time underwater. I don't know where the resources for tension building went. It certainly wasn't in the set design itself, because half the time you're in, you guessed it, a rainforesty environment with lots of trees. Oh, more than half, because now we're all super about exploration. But they weren't the only ones phoning it in either. Story writers were so incapable of creating consistent tension that they had to start in the middle of a plane crash to get your attention, then jump back 2 weeks for the events leading up to the plane crash. Want to guess what those 2 weeks cleared up about the plane crash? Nothing really. Want to know what the plane crash added to the 2 weeks before it? Nothing really. They just needed to artificially jumpstart your adrenaline because otherwise you might think you picked up the wrong game. Not only that, but they managed to go and spit in the memory of Tomb Raider 2013. Not on purpose, I'm sure, but the point of that remake was to frame Lara Croft as a girl in way over her head, trained in various survival areas, but ultimately fighting for her life in reality for the first time, shaping herself from a clever but naive girl into a strong, battle-hardened woman. In this game, you find out that Lara Croft has been cheating death since she was like, what, 11? Yamatai? That's just what she would call a wild weekend. Probably wouldn't even classify as crazy in this dame's book. I bet she probably had to do a 3-mile rope climb just to get to math class every day. No biggie. So with old fans and new fans now sufficiently let down, we've got the decisions made for the general audience. Mainly I mean side quests. Why are those there? Why are they even necessary? What did they add? It's not even like they're frequent, which makes it even more baffling. At least if there were more than one throughout every digestive cycle, I'd have thought there was some misguided misunderstanding of what their place in video games were meant to be, rather than a convenient little break to keep me entertained while I take a shit. Couple that with the aforementioned unnecessary reward systems and the fact that they included shopkeepers for similarly unnecessary reason, and you're really just left scratching your head. Shadow of the Tomb Raider isn't a terrible game by any stretch of the imagination. In terms of quality components, it's great. It looks good, it plays well for the most part, it checks off all the boxes necessary to be classified as a video game that a lot of people will play and probably enjoy. Your average consumer will not be disappointed. Probably. Unless, you know, they know better than to like underwater levels, but you've actually got quite a fair few stragglers that swear it creates tension and is good game design. I can't imagine what it must feel like to be that wrong on a daily basis. For those reasons, I'd give it a 6 out of 10, but factoring in the shady definitive edition nonsense, we'll bump that down to a 5. As a reminder, 5 isn't a negative score, it's a neutral score. The game isn't awful, but it's nothing special, and that's a shame. Because they have the resources and capacity to make it something truly special. They have the ingredients, they just keep fucking up the cooking directions. It's like they think doubling the heat will have the time necessary to cook a meal. Listen, Lara Croft is not an explorer. She's not in this gig to explore places. She's an adventurer, and she has specific intentions. More specifically, she's a tomb raider. She raids tombs. Her goals are to find tombs, to raid tombs, and to stop whatever cataclysmic events some other party has ignorantly gotten the world into. Trim the fat with no mercy. There's nothing wrong with putting a game on a railway if you do it right. But, you know, give the core locations secrets. Secret pathways to treasure, secret challenges, lock them behind hidden tunnels that can only be found by solving ancient clues. It's hard to articulate what I mean, but give areas of interest depth. Don't try and give the world breadth. Lara Croft doesn't need to be hunting dodo birds to extinction. She doesn't need to be spending hours gathering twigs. She needs to be down in some dank, musty tomb trying to find Queen Cleopatra's anal beads. She needs to be in a cavern she found behind a wall that looked weaker than the rest, as if created after the initial structure. The biggest problem with this game, after the occasional glitch of course, is its identity crisis. It's trying to be too much of too many things, and it ends up being too little of any of them. Thank you everyone for watching, and special thanks to Crystal Dynamics for developing this game series about a girl who's never quite the Tomb Raider, despite the first game being titled simply Tomb Raider. Can't wait for the 60th installation, debatably a Tomb Raider, but not quite objectively speaking. Until next time, remember that failure is not the worst case scenario. To go on with your bad selves and stay awesome.